Good morning, everyone. It's Grampy here again, and it's Monday. The what are we at? We're at the 5th of February, and what that means is in 2024, it means that I'm in Florida. Can you see out there? Because we are down here in Florida for a little portion of the family to have a vacation. So I just thought there were some things on my mind, and you are all on my mind because we just spent some time up at Daniel's house and got to see a precious little collection of Smithies there. And we're down here, and I know there's a precious little collection of Smithies here. And there are collections of Smithies elsewhere. And you're all on my mind today. And honestly, that's what these little talks are about. It's a way for me to reach out to you and hopefully communicate the love that I have for you all, and also to I don't know, just encourage your hearts and let you know that I'm thinking about you, and hopefully provide some understanding and some clues and some encouragement for today and for life. So today, the thought of prayer has been on my mind, and I was listening to a podcast, and the person that was sharing their testimony was talking about how they had reached a place in their life where it was they had hit rock bottom, and they just simply cried out. They just groaned from their place of anguish. I think it was the disillusionment of religion, of their hopes and expectations for a happy family life. It could have been a number of things, but what it was as much a groan and a cry out as an articulated prayer. And they cited, and I also have noted this, that when the children of Israel were in bondage in Egypt, that it was simply the groaning of their sufferings. I mean, it was a long time. 400 years is a really long time for things to get worse and worse and worse. So it was, I mean, we oftentimes, like, we kind of identify with what it means to groan under the weight of something. But in both of, in these cases where, God just moves, there's a connection, a relationship between the measure of heart anguish and heart investment in the situation that gets his attention. And in both of these cases, it was anguish, it was suffering, it was grief. These things touch the heart of God, and it's a great entry point to talk about the topic of prayer. Just with this here, it's just to realize that God is a God that is there, and He does hear, and He does know, He does see us in our situations. He sees us in our joyful times, and perhaps even more encouraging, He sees us in our hard times, because those are the times that really can challenge our understanding of who He is, or belief in who He is. But the assurance is there that He hears us. He hears us when we cry to Him. And so, just with that little thought in mind, the assurance that God is a God who hears and answers prayer, I want to move into 3 passages that touch on the topic of prayer. All 3 were penned by the Apostle John. 2 come out of the Gospel of John, and 1 out of his first general epistle. And let me pull my phone up here. Sorry about this, guys. So, in John 14, verses 12 and 13, we'll kind of focus on 13 and 14 here, but we'll just throw John 14:12 in, just for a little context and for fun. Jesus said, "Truly, truly, I say to you, whoever believes in me will also do the works that I do, and greater works than these will he do, because I am going to the Father. Whatever you ask in my name, this will I do, that the Father may be glorified in the Son. If you ask anything in my name, I will do it. And I really added verse 12 into that 3-verse context because it really is related. It's kind of related, but it's kind of not. But both of these, the topics of both of these, have to do with our relationship with God and our invitation and our call to do His works, to see His works, to invite His working into our lives and into our world. So they each really pretty much stand as like mind-blowing promises, right? Like, how could Jesus really say this and mean it? And how can we really believe it, or can we believe it enough to bring them into into life, into reality? So first of all, he says, I say to you, whoever believes in me will do the works that I do and greater, because I'm going to the Father. So, I mean, that alone is probably still one of those promises that's pretty hard to wrap our mind around it. There's a part of us that says, well, seeing people, spiritually regenerated to new life is in itself a greater work than anything that Jesus did. And that really is true. And yet, I think there's a part of this that goes beyond that to the works that he did. Like, okay, so then maybe that's the greater work, but what about the works that he did? So there's a whole set of teachings that I hope to do that touch on the works that Jesus is, that come to our minds when we hear him say this. But for today, I'm not going to be able to go that way. But I do want to touch on also, it's as equally as incredible that Jesus said, whatever you ask in my name, this will I do. Again, if we had any questions about it, he said, if you ask anything in my name, I will do it. So there's two things that I want to cite before we move on to the next passage, because there's a continuity between these three passages that you'll see. But suffice it to say that for right now, I want to say that we can ask incredible things from God. We can ask what might seem unbelievable or unattainable or outlandish. We can talk to God about those things. We can ask for them. We can dream about them. We can hope for them. We can yearn for them. And especially when we're looking at situations that seem hopeless for those that we love, for our own lives. But there's something, something of the image of Jesus ministering was entirely for the benefit of others. Right, so he had his own needs that he was obviously concerned about, but what marked the life, ministry, the prayer life of Jesus was relational, centered toward the Father, and it was directed primarily toward other people. So yes, there were times where Jesus anguished over his own inner struggles, like in the garden. We see in Hebrews 5:7 where it talks about that in the days of his flesh, he offered up prayers with tears and loud cries to the Father. And I'm convinced that goes beyond the garden experience. But the invitation here is to dream big, actually, to see these verses for what they really are. And yet, if we start to wade into them and like, how do we do this? Like, I don't see this, or I feel kind of like awkward asking for certain things, or my faith doesn't seem like, how do I build my faith? Lots of questions like that. Let's just move into the next passage, because it's intended to be like building understanding as we move toward, like, how do we get there? Like, so my phone died. Okay, John 15:7. So adding on to, if you ask anything in my name, I will do it. Jesus adds this: if you abide in me, John 15:7, and my words abide in you, ask whatever you wish, and it will be done for you. By this is my Father glorified, that you bear much fruit, and so prove to be my disciples. As the Father have loved me, so have I loved you. Abide in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. Now, we may not like this idea that I'm going to introduce here, but the fact is that it's here, and it's here because what we're talking about is a relationship with God. We're talking about relationships with a person who has infinite resources, who is infinitely glorious, and who is infinitely mysterious and unsearchable. He invites us to search out his mind. So what we're talking about here is we're talking about Jesus injects conditional elements to this idea of answered prayer. And that shouldn't really disturb us unless we think God is just a machine who has set these principles in motion, and just all we need to do is push the right button, enter the right code and pull the slot. Boom, we get our answer in our prayer. Like he's done it all, or something like he's this great watchmaker in the sky who's just set this clock in motion, and all we got to do is get in line with what it's doing, and we get our thing, right? And it is just not that way, folks. It is just not that way. We have been drawn into a relationship to know Jesus Christ, to know the Father. And Jesus is giving us insight here into how can we know him? How can we experience this? These incredible promises. Here he says there's two conditions to receiving our prayers answered. One is that we need to abide in him. That just means we need to remain. We just need to continue to trust him. We need to continue to affirm our relationship with him in terms of his lordship over our lives, and our finding our security and our purpose in life in him, and reaffirming the appropriate relationship of faith and submission to the Lord Jesus Christ. So he says, let's see, if you abide in me. So that's the first one, just remaining in a posture of faith. Okay, continuing to trust him. And then he says, and if my words abide in you. So there's two things that move us toward understanding what this incredible access to answered prayer and the works of grace is to abide in faith and to let his words abide in us. And he says, by this my Father is glorified, that you bear much fruit and so prove to be my disciples. So the pathway toward this is part of the pathway of discipleship. And what that means is we're just learners. That's what a disciple is. Someone who has submitted themselves to another for the purpose of learning and to become like them. So the process of discipleship. And I've seen things like, this is just so wonderful, is that sometimes baby Christians with the tiniest little knowledge of any of this kind of stuff ask outlandish things, and God does it. And it just tickles me, because it's so much like how a father is, right? Like that's just his heart. His heart is to bless us, but his heart is also to grow us, right? This is the pathway of discipleship. And so we can't just assume that, well, I ask this crazy outlandish thing in faith, when I was a new Christian or at some point along the way, and he did it, right? Wow, that's awesome. It's just not always that simplistic. And the fact that we may or may not experience that the next time around doesn't mean anything. It just might mean God is inviting us further along this line of what it means to abide in him and for his words to abide in us, that we may continue to remain in this place where we ask what we will, and he gives us. The other thing too is, what does it mean to ask in his name? And the simple answer to this is this. It means that we ask as his representatives and in his authority. we come to the Father in his name, meaning we come to the Father because of what Jesus has done for us. We come in the righteousness that he bought for us, that we have accepted and we've applied to ourselves. He's applied to us, and we come because of what he has done to give us the way to him. We also ask because he has empowered us with rights, with authority to come before him, to make our requests be known, and also to take that same authority into the world. So what it means to do or ask anything in Jesus' name, it simply means to ask as his ambassador, under his authority, with his rights associated to, whether it's the coming to receive or whether it's the leaving to give and deliver. Okay, we are standing as his agents, as his representatives under his authority. That's what it means to ask or to do anything in his name. So here we see the conditions. And he also tied in the fact that the insight that that he himself operated in kind of a relationship of condition with the Father, because he said here in as the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. And if you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. So if we think that somehow this conditional element is foreign to true faith or the Christian life, it's really built into the relationship Jesus operated in, and or even has in the Trinity, within the Godhead, right? I'll fully understand it, but lest we feel like we're being taken to a lower place because we're given some conditions that relate to our relationship with God or our functioning, as his children or operating in that. It was the same way with Jesus, right? He said, I do nothing except I see my Father do it. I say nothing except I hear what my Father say. So he willingly submitted himself to some conditions. So that's enough on conditions. Are we all okay? I sure hope so. So the next passage really takes this to the landing zone. Okay, this is where a solid understanding of answered prayer really comes together, because we've seen we can ask. As his children, we can ask, and he's good. He gives us the desires of our hearts, right? And then he says in 1 John chapter 5, verse 14, he says, and this is the confidence that we have toward him, that if we ask anything according to his will, he hears us. And if we know that he hears us in whatever we ask, we know that we have the requests that we have asked of him. So this takes it pulls together the relational aspects of our access to the Father to ask in prayer, the conditional elements of a life of discipleship where we abide in him and his words abide in us. All right. And then we continue to move in our relationship with him. And as we move in, what I have found is that our prayer life becomes less and less and less about asking for certain things to be done, as it just comes to the glory of discovering who he is, of what it really means to abide in him, and for his words to abide in us and renew our minds and open our understanding of the glorious things that he's made available to us. Here, John really sticks the landing, okay? He says that if we ask anything according to his will, he hears us. How do we know what that is? All right? And we could say, well, we could go to this chapter or this verse and we could say that, but it really goes beyond that. It's not questioning whether the Bible is true. It's questioning what aspects of this multidimensional God are at work, or that he wants to bring to work in a given situation. And there's no shortcut to that, folks. It is through abiding, it's through knowing him. And this is where prayer, the bigger dimension of discovery of the will of God for a particular person, situation, becomes, kind of front and center here. And that really is, it's not that God is holding things out at a distance. He's inviting us nearer to fully cooperate and partner with him in his desire to reach each individual with an individual response in their individual situation, because he sees everyone as unique. This isn't just like a one size fits all, take a promise, slap it on a situation, and off you go. No, Jesus sends us out to reach individuals with an individual message and delivery of love to them. And this is what I think is like one of the greatest discoveries and blessings of being sent out into the world and operating in a world where we kind of stand between heaven and earth. We operate between heaven and earth. And so I guess that's what I just want to encourage us with, is that God has offered incredible things for us to walk in, to discover, to operate in, and to see him break the rules of this world and bring us into a life that's of a different nature, and also to function in a level that is unattainable by the world, to know joy, peace, love, and all of those fruits, to see God bring in the power and the grace into this life. When Jesus said that when he said, thy king, pray this, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. What he was saying is we're going to see situations where we can say, God's will is not being done in this situation. This is not right. We need to see change here. We need to make, we can't abide this. This has got to go. We need the grace of God and the truths and the power of the kingdom of God here and now. This is what it is to be people of prayer, to be people who know their God, and people who take his name to a world that needs him. So may God encourage your hearts today. May you continue to ask great things of God. May you not lose heart when the prayers don't come as you think they should, or in the time you think they should, or in the way you think they should. God is still hearing your answer in answering our prayer. He's maybe drawing us in to know his heart, to know his mind. But prayer is, and last thought here, I have found that prayer is less about asking than it is about knowing and conversing with God to discover what his mind, like in any situation. God, just, I don't even think this, but I mean, I'm going to say it, but I just think it all the time. God, what are your thoughts on this situation? What's your will here? Is this consistent with your kingdom? Okay. And it's a conversational sort of relationship that really becomes the body of what the life of prayer is. So may God bless you and keep you today. Know that your Grampy loves you.